went to the Russians and bought a satellite photo of the area. Not one single tank. Years later, when questioned by reporters, Powell admitted there were no tanks, that in effect he had lied. And for those of you who do not remember, Colin Powell was the officer who covered up the My Lai massacre.
Repeat after me. I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly...
When George W. Bush took office in 2000, he brought with him Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and Deputy Secretary for Defense Paul Wolfowitz, all of whom had served together previously in the administrations of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Paul Wolfowitz, in particular, had long been recognized as the intellectual force behind a radical neoconservative fringe of the Republican Party. For years, Wolfowitz had been advancing the idea that the United States should reconsider its commitments to international treaties, international law, and multilateral organizations such as the United Nations. A radical plan for American military domination first surfaced during the administration of George H.W. Bush. In 1992, Paul Wolfowitz, working in the Department of Defense, was asked to write the first draft of a new national security strategy, a document entitled the Defense Planning Guidance. The most controversial elements of what would later come to be known as the Wolfowitz Doctrine were that the United States should dramatically increase defense spending, that it should be willing to take preemptive military action, and that it should be willing to use military force unilaterally, with or without allies. This new reliance on military force was necessary, according to Wolfowitz, to prevent the emergence of any future or potential rivals to American power, and to secure access to vital resources, especially Persian Gulf oil. Out of power during the Clinton presidency, Wolfowitz and his colleagues affiliated themselves with a number of influential conservative think tanks. In 2000, they would craft yet another proposed national security strategy, this one published by a right-wing think tank calling itself the Project for the New American Century. At its core, the document revived the Wolfowitz Doctrine. It called on the United States to increase the military budget by up to $100 billion, to deny other nations the use of outer space, and to adopt a more aggressive and unilateral foreign policy that would allow the United States to act offensively and preemptively in the world. The elimination of states like Iraq figured prominently in this grand vision. But even these hardline conservatives knew that the Wolfowitz Doctrine was likely too radical to win the support of the foreign policy establishment, their own Republican Party, and the American people. In their defining document, written in September of 2000, a full year before 9/11, they acknowledged that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent, in their own chilling words, some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year later, that event would arrive.
David Von Kleist is the host of the popular radio program The Power Hour. He's the maker of the new film, 9/11 in Plain Sight. All right, David, please come out here. Welcome.
Before I start, I want to thank any of the listeners that we've got out there of the Power Hour for helping to keep us on the air. How many listeners do we have out there? I know there's a few of you. I thank you. And the listeners know that this is going to be a team effort. If we're to get the information out about what truly happened on September 11th, we have to somehow overcome the mindset and the brainwashing that's been subjected upon the American people for not just the past several years, and not just the past several decades, but for several generations. Right off the bat, I'm going to say a word. We're going to play some word association. I want you to all to scream the first word that comes to your mind. Are you ready? Conspiracy theory. Now, there are two words in that phrase. The active word is theory. By definition, a theory is an idea, a supposition, a concept. Here's an example. In theory, if I purchase a raffle ticket, I could win a prize. Now, as long as you don't buy that raffle ticket, that win is theoretical. But once you buy one raffle ticket, it becomes a possibility. And the more raffle tickets you purchase, the more possible and eventually probable your win becomes. That's what it is with a conspiracy theory. When you have no evidence, it is a conspiracy theory. But once you have one piece of evidence, no matter how circumstantial or flimsy it may be, it becomes a possibility. And the more evidence you gather, the more possible and eventually probable the conspiracy is. Now, we have to keep this in mind when we look at all the information about September 11th. Now, about 6 weeks ago, I released a documentary film called 911 in Plain Sight. Curiously, thank you. Curiously, there were some individuals that somehow found a way to write a review on this documentary 3 weeks before it was released. They said all kinds of things, said like, this is manipulated footage. Yeah, that's what it was. It's doctored photographs. Yeah, photo workshop. That's the ticket. Yeah. I assure you that what you see on that video is unmanipulated, unaltered video footage and photographs. So let's put that to rest right away. For those of you that have seen the documentary, I actually held the DVD from CNN entitled America Remembers right up into the lens of the camera. And yet some still say it was manipulated footage. There's some folks that just don't want us to consider the possibility that maybe there was something other than a terrorist with a box cutter in his hand that was responsible for slamming planes into targets on September 11th. Now, you've seen some of the clips here about the Pentagon. 2.5 years ago, I wrote an article called From Deception to Revelation, and I was summarily raked over the coals for even having the audacity and the unmitigated gall to suggest that something other than a 757 had hit the Pentagon. People said I must have been some part of a COINTELPRO operation. Artichoke, that's what it was. And now, and I don't even want to bring up some of the websites out there that claim to want to know what really happened. Some of them really want to snoop around to find out what's really going on. You could figure it out. But when people look at these videos, the video clips in 911 in Plain Sight, the big question comes up, Dave, you're saying that